What's up, everyone, and welcome to D Spot. This is the spot for all things empowerment through yoga, meditation, and psychoeducation. My name is Dalia, and I am here to be your guide. So, I recently created a poll on Instagram asking you what you are currently struggling with, what feelings or emotions you're struggling with, especially in the context of the ongoing genocide in Palestine, which I know has been very difficult for many. And a lot of you responded with the feeling of guilt. So in this video, I'm going to talk to you about guilt, how to manage it, how to overcome it, and how we can begin to process it. So traditionally speaking, guilt is an aversive emotion like shame or pride or embarrassment. But these kinds of emotions are described as self-conscious emotions because they involve us reflecting on ourselves and our role. So it requires a level of consciousness or awareness. Now, people may feel guilty for many reasons. Maybe they've done something that they consider wrong or society considers wrong. Maybe they thought thoughts that were immoral, or maybe they didn't do something that they should have done, or whatever it is, it's feeling bad because you think that you did something bad. But in the context of what's happening in Palestine, specifically with the genocide and the war happening there, the kind of guilt that we're talking about is survivor's guilt. That's more of a relevant kind of guilt to the situation that's happening. And it's something that tends to arise in the aftermath of a great tragedy. But in this case, it's an ongoing tragedy. And it's this questioning of why am I spared and they're not? And it's often accompanied by feelings of sadness and of injustice at what's happening. And a lot of us who suffer from survivor's guilt, we may question ourselves, we may question our actions, we may question why we survived, and it can leave us feeling burdened, carrying this deep emotional burden at the loss of others as well. And it's really important to note that this kind of guilt also comes from a deep level of empathy and compassion. Because when we're witnessing the suffering of others, our empathetic nature connects us to their pain. And that causes us to feel really sad and to feel really compassionate. And sometimes that brings on feelings of fear and helplessness and frustration and anger. And it's all blended into this potent emotional experience that we call guilt. But really, it's a myriad of emotions. But at the core of it, it comes from your good heart, your compassionate and empathetic nature, and that's testimony to you. So I respect it, I honor it. However, it's not the most productive emotion if it's left untreated or left unchecked. So it can be a very empowering emotion if we channel it correctly, but it is a testimony to our humanity and all that. However, it is important for us to transform this emotion from a paralyzing burden to a driving force for positive action. Now, in general, when it comes to survivor's guilt, there's three themes, right? So the first is we have guilt about surviving. And that's typically what we think of when we're thinking of survivor's guilt. How did I stay safe? Other people are not feeling safe. And maybe there's a small part of you that subconsciously believes that they don't deserve to be safe or should have been harmed as well. And all of this kind of leads to cognitive distortions that make you question the fairness and the justness of the world, causing you to feel even more heavy emotions. So that's the first theme, which is guilt about surviving. And the second is guilt over what you should have done. So you start feeling guilty that you didn't do enough. I could have posted more. I could have protested more. I could have donated more. I could have tried harder to explain the truth of the situation. But at the core of it is an inflated sense of failure or an inflated sense of responsibility. If only I had done something more. That, again, is a cognitive distortion, this inflated sense of responsibility and failure. That's how you're perceiving it. And that's contributing to the feeling of guilt. And the third theme or third bucket is guilt over what you did do. So you may also feel guilty for example, in the context of most of us leaving our families in the Middle East or wherever and moving abroad for better opportunities and to create a better life. And for a lot of us third generation kids who know our parents witnessed war and been through all this trauma, we feel guilty that here we are living our lives and like we're very privileged, yet they know the suffering that we've been spared from. And so I think it's important to also acknowledge the bucket in which you fall on. Are you feeling guilty for surviving? Are you feeling guilty over what you should be doing? Or are you feeling guilty over what you did do? Those are all valid experiences. But now let's talk about how we can overcome them. Okay. So the first thing, I'm going to share with you 5 tips on how you can begin to process and overcome this. And the first is ask yourself, who is really responsible here? Are you taking on responsibility that doesn't belong to you? Most of the times, the answer to this is yes. So, I mean, are you to blame for Israel's actions? Are you to blame for the actions of Western leaders who are egging it on? Of course not. You're not to blame for that. In the end, you can mourn those who were lost, but you can't take on the culpability for that loss. You can do things like calling your representatives and emailing your representatives and sending them letters to cease fire. But over that, you cannot take on the responsibility for all that loss. Now, it's interesting to think about, why do survivors have such an inflated sense of personal responsibility? So in situations when you definitely don't, like this, obviously you did not cause this is not your fault, but you still feel guilty. And that could be because guilt is functioning as a false sense of control. We all think that we are in control, or we believe we have some kind of control, or that's what our brain wants for us. But the truth of the matter is we don't have control over a lot of things that happen outside of us. So if you have this imbalanced sense of control, then you can start feeling guilty, because when you're taking on blame for taking on the burden of responsibility, and you tell yourself that this was all your fault because somehow you have a say in the matter. Again, that is a cognitive distortion which you can fix when you're literally asking yourself, is there another way for me to see this? Can I focus on what I can control? Am I to blame for this? So asking yourself the right questions can help you. And I know that guilt feels lousy in and of itself, but it also kind of protects us from even more overwhelming feelings of helplessness and powerlessness, which if you are feeling that, please refer to my video on helplessness and how to overcome it. So that was the first tip, is to really put the responsibility on those who are responsible and don't take on more responsibility than you should. And the second is to remind yourself that you can allow yourself to handle the feelings of sadness and loss. So to remind yourself that maybe guilt is masking another emotion. So, I mean, dealing with guilt is actually easier than dealing with the devastation that we can feel when we're grieving, or the devastation of this extreme sadness, right? So focusing on the guilt can be our subconscious way of avoiding how we're actually feeling. So reminding yourself that you can handle your emotions, that all emotions are temporary, that all you can do is to allow yourself to feel the emotion, and then it transforms. But avoiding the true emotion bubbling underneath the guilt and just focusing on the guilt is just going to make the situation way worse. So by allowing yourself to feel the feelings, you can practice more acceptance, more empowerment, more taking inspired action. And a lot of people have a belief that it's not safe to experience these intense emotions, or that it's bad or wrong to experience these kind of heavy emotions. But screw that. Okay, there are no such things as bad emotions, right? There are no emotions that are going to overwhelm you to the point that you can't get out of it. All right. You absolutely can. You can process your emotions. You can slam a pillow on a couch. You can scream, you can cry, you can journal, you can do whatever you need to do to process your emotions. But it's important that you actually allow yourself to process those emotions, right? The best thing that you can do is to allow yourself to feel. Now, the third tip I have for you is to think about the people who love you and how they would feel about your survival. So if you have even an unconscious inkling or suspicion that, oh, why them, not me? Why am I still here? Why am I spared? It's not fair. I should also have perished. Then just think of your parents, think of your grandparents, think of the family, think of the people who love you, the people who are in your life, and how freaking devastated they would be if you weren't here. Think about all the people who cared deeply about you and who are actually overjoyed and relieved that you are okay. You've been given the gift of survival. So rather than rejecting that gift, because you maybe feel like you don't deserve it, maybe buried underneath it are unconscious themes of unworthiness, of feeling not good enough, then what you can do is you can share your gift of survival with those who love you. That's the very least that we can do, right? And the fourth thing is remembering that luck is random, okay? Bear with me. Hidden under survivor's guilt is this idea that there is a finite amount of luck or good fortune to go around, and that by you benefiting from that good fortune, you're taking away from someone else's good fortune. So if I'm survived, it means someone else has to die. That is a cognitive distortion. Luck is random. There is no such thing as, again, going back to the focus of control, or the what we can control, what we can't control. So just remember, sometimes things can be a bit random, and there is no such thing as the universe is infinite. There's no finite, like there's no what's the word? Starts with an S, scarcity. There's no scarcity when it comes to luck and what the universe has to offer. So changing again, as you can see, there's so many cognitive distortions that are leading to these feelings, and learning how to stop the thought and to challenge that thought is really the most profound and powerful thing that you can do when it comes to your healing. And the fifth tip I have for you is to channel your emotions into something productive, doing an act of kindness, being of service, creating meaning for someone else. Those are all ways that you can, transform that guilt into becoming a motivator for purposeful action. So a lot of people think of guilt as like regret for the past, but we can use that guilt to change the future, to change how we feel right now. Because feeling guilty, why is it a positive emotion? Because it drives us to do the right thing. If we do something bad, we take accountability, we apologize, we try to get it, we try to fix it. But with survivor's guilt, where we actually haven't really done something bad, there are still ways to make things right. We can commemorate, we can serve, we can honor those who have been lost. So there are still things that you can do to give back. And the only thing that I know that really reduces guilt, the best way, is action, taking inspired action, doing good for others. So those are my 5 tips. And again, a lot of it requires you to challenge your thoughts and how you are perceiving the situation. So are you taking on more responsibility and more blame than you should? If not, then challenge that. Focus on who is actually responsible for that, and then focus on what you can do. The second thing is remind yourself that you can handle negative emotions, because sometimes guilt can mask other emotions, but you are allowed to feel those things. You are allowed to process those things, and you are allowed to understand that when you sit with those emotions, they transform and they change. And the third thing is to think about the people who love you and how they might feel about your survival. Your survival is a gift that you get to share with them. Number four, remember that luck is infinite and it's random. There's no finite amount of luck. Just by you surviving, it doesn't mean that by law of universe, someone else has to die. And the fifth tip is to take action to create purpose and meaning by taking inspired action and channeling and processing that guilt. So I hope that you found that helpful. If you like this video, please do like, share, and subscribe. And just know that you matter, your feelings matter, and learning how to process your guilt so that you can be more productive in this cause is an important thing to do. Leave a comment. Let me know if there's anything else that you'd like to learn about or another feeling that you're currently struggling with, and I will do a video on it. Thank you so much. Remember, you are resilient, you are strong. Hang in there. I'm rooting for us. We're on the right side of history. Sending you all the love.